All right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Florida Museum 360 virtual experience. Today, we're going to take a step back in time via a virtual visit to Florida Museum's Fossil Hall to explore actually horses today, the horse record, and how they've influenced evolution and climate change. To get started, we're going to be meeting our youth outreach coordinator at the museum, Alberto. He's going to be talking with a very special guest, Dr. Bruce MacFadden, who's actually a paleontologist who specializes in horse fossils. So today is brought to you by the Florida Museum of Natural History and the U.S. Thompson Earth Systems Institute's Scientist in Every Florida School program. Because there's a lot to see and do, I'm actually going to hand things over at this time to our team so we can start the adventure. Alberto?
Hey everyone, so bear with me here. I'm just gonna switch screens up. So now we are transported into the museum. So anyways, I will be navigating us through the tour. So buckle up and get ready to experience the Florida Museum in 360. And during the tour, there will be opportunities for you to engage with us. So please use the chat box to answer any questions we ask you, and be sure to type any questions that you might have, and we will answer them at the end as well. So horses are a beloved modern species and can easily attract the public's attention. So there are also classic examples of long-term macroevolution when we look at the evolutionary sequence of fossil horses spanning the past 50 million years. So during this tour, you will learn about some misconceptions about horses in North America. An example, like when were they first introduced into North America? And as we walk through the fossil hall, we will touch on these points and others that are exemplified in the fossil hall. So anyways, here we are. We're, virtually here right in front of the fossil hall, right in front of the entrance. And I'm gonna take us into the fossil hall, and I'm gonna start asking Bruce a couple of questions here because I'm sure there will be lots of interesting things in this fossil hall that we're gonna learn about. So bear with me as we virtually walk into the fossil hall. All right, and let's stop right around here. So Bruce, it seems like our tour starts underwater. Were there underwater horses in Florida?
Alberto, thank you very much. Yes, we are currently going through a walk through time in Florida's prehistoric past, and it begins underwater about 40 million years ago in what paleontologists call the Eocene epoch. And we definitely are underwater. There was no land, and therefore there were no horses. There were some marine, there was lots of different kinds of marine life that lived in the Eocene seas of Florida 40 million years ago, but definitely no horses.
Okay, just wanted to make that clear. So that said, though, I've heard the term sea cows, and I remember seeing one of our exhibit panels that kind of explores that. So I'm gonna move right in front of that panel and take a look at it and see what we have here. And actually, I have a question for the audience here. So this is, I guess, the sea cows that we have in our exhibit hall. So I want to ask the audience, does this animal that you see right here, does this remind you of an animal that you might have heard of or seen before? Write your answers in the chat.
I wonder if you can get a little closer, or actually there's a reconstruction in the back in the Eocene, just around the corner behind this, of what the animal looked like. I saw it when you were leaving the Eocene Sea and going into where we are now.
Oh, this one over here?
No, that's a toothed whale, but 180 degrees. There you go, getting close. Keep going to the left.
Right here.
It's before you make the. It's before. Yeah. That's actually a fossil shark, but if you were to turn 180 degrees behind, yeah. And then walk around the corner. Go back and walk around the corner. And then
right
look,
here.
Yeah, and look straight ahead there and a little bit to the right. little bit
I
more, right there, right there. Okay, that animal right there is a reconstruction of the skulls that you were showing in that display case. But what I'm saying is that during the Eocene, there were animals that you're talking about right now that were living in the underwater in the sea, and it's that reconstruction right there that I'm.
See.
You see?
See. So Stephanie, how did our audience do? What answers do we have?
They did really well. We've got sea cows and manatees from Ms. PJ and Kirsten Levitz.
Awesome. So what do you have to say about that, Bruce?
Yeah, so sea cows, they're the ancestors of modern day sea cows, or what are called manatees, are known from Florida. And the reconstruction was what we just saw, but then Alberto, you're zeroing in on some of the larger skulls of manatees that lived in Florida about 30 to 35 million years ago in the fringes of the ancient peninsula in the coastal areas. And these were definitely ancestral to the modern sea cows. The reason they're called cows is because they eat grass like cows do, but they don't eat grass on land, they eat seagrass. The seagrass mats that sway back and forth in the coastal areas of Florida are the kind of foods that modern day manatees really prefer. And we know from the fossil record that these ancient manatee ancestors also ate seagrass.
Awesome. All right. So where should we move next, Bruce? Maybe
Let's go.
Here?
Yeah, let's go to that little display case with the fossils in them and the skeleton right behind. Right. Yeah. Get as close to you as you can to that display case right there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we're just about to enter a part of the exhibit that we call the ancient Florida Peninsula. And in the background are the kinds of skeletons. We'll talk more about those in a few minutes. But those are the kinds of animals that used to live on the peninsula based on the fossil record. When the peninsula first got started during what scientists call the Oligocene epoch, which was about 30 million years ago, give or take, we find tiny teeth of mammals that used to live in Florida during this time. And some of those teeth represent the first evidence of horses that used to live in Florida on the ancient peninsula during the Oligocene. And you see the map right to the right of the display case with those tiny teeth. And you can see in green, that's the extent of the ancient peninsula as it existed when fossil horses are first found in what's now Florida. Okay, so this is just a glimpse of what we're going to see much more of in the future as we go to our next station, which has a couple of reconstructed skeletons from the Miocene Thomas Farm locality. So if you'd go around the corner and look back, then we'll see those fossil horses.
All right, let's move right around here. And how about this view right here? Does that one work?
It does. In fact, if you could zero in on the things in front of the tree, perfect. Yeah. And just a little bit to the left, but keep that one skeleton where your cursor is, just a little more. Perfect. Okay, so now we've gone from the underwater sea at 40 to 50 million years ago. We've walked through time past the Oligocene, where we have the first teeth of fossil horses on the tiny peninsula that we just saw. And now we're going to an ancient sinkhole locality called the Thomas Farm from rural Gilchrist County, about an hour northwest of Gainesville. And there are literally tens of thousands of fossil bones that scientists from the Florida Museum of Natural History have collected over almost for about 70 years from this one locality. And the cool thing about Thomas Farm is we find two different kinds of horses that lived alongside one another. They coexisted in ancient ecosystems. And one of them in the back, the lighted one, the lighter colored one in the background, if you could point that right there, that's called Parahippus, the side-toed horse. And can we get a little closer to that, or is not so? Is that?
Oh yeah, this is the cool thing about this 360 tour, is that we could actually go beyond the barriers here and get even closer. Okay?
I want the audience to see the feet of this horse.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. So these horses had little hooves like modern day horses, but then flanking either side of the hooves are these tiny hooves. And therefore this animal was called the side-toed horse. It had 3 toes, whereas modern horses today only have a single toe, which is that central digit with that tiny hoof that you can see there, right there. So Parahippus was very, very common. 80% of the fossils that we find is of this mid-size, 3-toed extinct horse that lived in Florida 18 million years ago. But further to the left was a tiny dwarf horse that also lived alongside Parahippus in the same fossil locality, and it's the dark brown skeleton to the left. Perfect. So this Archaeohippus was also a 3-toed horse. You can see its tiny, you can see very nicely its side toes with the central hoof, which the central hoof is the same as a modern day horse. And this animal was about the size of, say, a greyhound or a medium-sized dog. So that's what was going on at Thomas Farm with regard to the horses. But in any ecosystem in the fossil record, both of the horses were herbivores or plant eaters, and something wanted to, at the top of the food chain, was always looking around to try to eat these herbivores. And we have the remains of a giant bear dog from Thomas Farm. Right in the middle of those 2 skeletons is the bear dog, if you can zero in on that. And this is a powerful predator. It's part bear and part dog. It's its own extinct family. And this particular type of bear dog has powerful crushing jaws that you can see in its skull. And it was about the size of a large wolf. Okay, and that was definitely the predator of animals like Parahippus to the right and Archaeohippus to the left. So Thomas Farm is really important because it gives us a glimpse to the beautiful. We have a lot of bones, so we could reconstruct the skeletons of these animals and get a sense of what their body structure was like and what the ecosystems were like, where the horses were feeding on the plants and the bear dog was feeding on the horses.
So, and this fossil right here, this one's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
It reminds me of animals that I don't usually see in North America, but I'm not sure if that's actually right. Let me see if I could take a little different view so you could see what I'm saying. So it has like a little horn structure, like right at the tip of its skull right here. Can you tell us
there you
about
go.
this fossil?
Why don't we ask the audience what they think this fossil is? It lived in Florida 10 million years ago.
That's a good idea, Bruce. Let's see. What do you guys think? What are we looking at here? This one right in front of us. It's pretty big as well. Does this remind you of any animal that still exists today? Not necessarily here in North America.
Okay, we've got one guess so far, a rhino.
That's correct. This is a fossil rhinoceros called Pliocene that lived in Florida 10 million years ago, 8 million years after the Thomas Farm fossils that we just saw during what scientists call the Miocene epoch. And rhinoceroses lived in the same ecosystems as a diversity of horses. And these rhinos were part of the same ecosystem. And the horses are actually, we see some of the nice fossil horse exhibits. If you can go to the glass case behind Teleoceros and show the horse, it's to the left there, the horse legs. That's a really good exhibit that shows, let's see, right, okay, if we can get as close as we can. Perfect. So these are some reconstructions of the partial skeletons of herbivorous animals, plant-eating animals, actually plant-eating animals and herbivores that used to live in Florida during the Miocene about 10 million years ago. And to the left, all the way to the left, that cloven hoof, as we called, was an ancient camel that used to live in Florida during this time. The one in the center is a horse, and you can see it had 3 toes like the Parahippus that we showed just a few minutes ago. And to the right is something that has really sharp claws. So that was probably a cat-like animal that used to live in Florida during this time. And then if you go to the right side of this display case, you can see that during this time, based on the teeth and the jaws of fossils that were collected from our localities, in the bottom there, those are examples of fossil horses. And there were many different kinds of fossil horses that lived in Florida during the Miocene, about 10 million years ago. And these are displayed for you in these cases. And then you also can see above that, the beautiful skulls at the top are not horses. The jaws below where you are right now are of the horses, but the skulls at the top represent ancient carnivores that lived in the same ecosystems. Those look to be like a giant cat-like animal to the left, and maybe more like a dog-like animal to the right. Again, in these ecosystems, we have fossil evidence of different levels of the ecological or trophic pyramid. The animals that were feeding on the plants, and the animals that were feeding on the animals that ate the plants. And that's just the web of life, the ecosystem, ancient ecosystems. Okay, let's see if there's anything we've missed here. No, we can go back and look at this giant animal with the ginormous beak.
Ooh, that looks like a fierce predator. Bruce.
Yeah, so let's go around. Look, let's go on its front end there. There you go. There you go. Okay, so about 5 million years ago, during what's called the Pliocene, after the Miocene, most of the predators in ancient ecosystems were mammals. We had saber-toothed cats. We had giant bone-crushing dogs. We had the bear dogs like we saw from Thomas Farm. But then about 5 million years ago, we had an animal that came in from South America. It walked across the Panama land bridge and then came into Mexico and up the Gulf Coast of Eastern North America. And then we find the remains of this particular animal from the Santa Fe River in Florida. We don't have a complete skeleton of this like we have for the other skeletons we've shown you before in this peninsula. We have about 40 individual bone fossils, mostly fragments of this animal. And paleontologists have worked with artists and sculptors to reconstruct, to sculpt what this giant animal might have been. Does anybody know what kind of animal, what kind of predator this was in ancient ecosystems?
Could you repeat that question again, Bruce?
What animal do you think this is that we're focusing on right now? Look at his giant skull with a beak.
Yeah, or at least like what animal does it remind you of, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Velociraptor.
It certainly looks like a dinosaur, that's for sure.
Well, it's very interesting because birds and dinosaurs are closely related. That's what scientists know now based on the evidence. And this particular animal, it's closely related to dinosaurs, but it's a giant flightless bird that lived during the Pliocene in southeastern North America. It's also known from animals in South America. This is the giant flightless bird called Titanus. Okay, terror bird. Yeah, Anna, you're correct. This was the terror bird that lived in Florida. It stands about 7 feet tall, 6 to 7 feet tall, and it had this massive beak and jaws. And this animal basically could have eaten any herbivore that it could potentially run down. It had to have been a very fast runner. It didn't have wings, but it was a flightless bird like modern day ostriches from Australia, for example. So this was the terror bird. Very good. And I just wanted to bring this out to you because everything we've talked about so far, going all the way back to the manatees, the horse teeth, the horse skeletons, the rhinos, the tiger, the saber-toothed cat, skulls, etc. Everything we've talked about so far are mammals. This is the exception to the rule in this peninsula. This was a giant flightless bird.
Very cool. Well, let's move further along in time, I guess, through this exhibit. And I can actually kind of see right behind the terror bird on the other side. So I'm going to whip around the corner. and look at it from the other side, because I think I see something that reminds me of a horse as well. Let's see if I could stand a little bit higher here. So, all right, it looks like horses got bigger as we went forward in time. Is that right, Bruce?
That's only partially correct. So if you think about, for example, in the Miocene, where we had 6 different species that all lived together, some got large and some got small. So yeah, some horses got large, like the ancestor of the modern day horse Equus, but some also in the fossil record got smaller. Anyway, that's a modern misconception, by the way, that horses started off small millions of years ago and then it just gradually got larger through time. That's not correct. Horses started off small. They diversified their body size. Some got large, some got small. Okay, and then the modern day horses from the part of this group of horses that got on the large end. Okay, so can we get a little closer to see the skeleton?
Yeah, let's see if I could skip over to the other side. Oh, yes, I can. Let's get extremely close. Is that close enough?
Oh, that's perfect. That's the perfect view that I wanted to show you. Look at its toe. Look at its feet. It only has one toe. That's right there. It doesn't have the side toes like we saw in Parahippus. It only has a single toe, and then it has that hoof core that you can see. So this animal was a one-toed horse. It lived during the ice ages in Florida. There was no ice in Florida, but it was a time of ice elsewhere in the world, and the climate changed or fluctuated during this time during the ice ages, or what paleontologists call the Pleistocene epoch. This horse was very common in Florida during the ice ages. In fact, horses have been very common in North America over the past 50 million years. We don't find them in the Eocene of Florida because Florida was underwater. But by the time you get to the Oligocene, to the Pleistocene, over the past 30 million years, horses are very dominant and dominantly preserved as fossils. This particular horse is very interesting because horses today are a family of animals that include domesticated horses, zebras, and donkeys, and other types of animals that are mostly from the old world, but not completely. And by studying the shape of the teeth of this particular type of horse that was collected from a highly fossiliferous locality south of Tampa called the Lycee Shell Pit, or what's now called the Paleo Preserve, paleontologists like myself know that horses in Florida in the Ice Age from about 1.5 to 2 million years ago are related to modern zebras. Huh. Okay, so think about it. On our journey so far, we've seen a rhinoceros that lived in Florida 10 million years ago, and rhinoceroses live today in Africa, but they don't live in North America today. They became extinct at the end of the Ice Age, and the same story is true for the horse and its relative, the zebras. Back 1.5 to 2 million years ago, horse-like animals lived in Florida, but they were more closely related to zebras, just like in the modern day in Africa. So I think, let's see, let's go back.
Sure, yeah, I think there's an illustration that maybe our audience could kind of take a look at what that might have looked like.
Yeah, this is a beautiful mural done by a famous paleo artist, Charles Buell, showing if we were to go on a field trip back in time to Florida, in Florida about 1.5 to 2 million years ago, these are the kinds of animals that we would have seen. Can we get a little closer? Or is...
Oh, yeah.
Perfect. There we go. So what we have in the left is the terror bird, which persisted to live into the ice ages. To the lower right is a saber-toothed cat. In the background are proboscideans, which are animals that have a proboscis or a trunk and tusks, and those are mammoths and mastodons, the precursors of modern elephants that used to live in Florida. Chomping on that tree over in the upper left-hand corner is a gigantic ground sloth. We know that ground sloths lived in Florida during this time. So all of these animals existed in the same ecosystem as these modern zebra-like, as these extinct zebra-like animals that lived in Florida during the ice ages, which you can see featured in the middle of this beautiful mural. Horses ate grass, and we know that modern zebras also eat grass in ancient ecosystems. We also know that horses were domesticated in the old world in what's now the areas of like northern Asia, north of China, the steppes of Mongolia, for example. They were primarily domesticated about 6,000 or 7,000 years ago in the old world. And the wave of domestication of horses spread quickly throughout the old world. Horses had become extinct in North America by this time, by about 10,000 years ago. Several thousand years later, they were domesticated in Eurasia, Europe and Asia, and Africa. Europe and Asia. And then it was quickly realized by humans that horses were very valuable as domesticates. Okay, as part of their stables, so to speak, the kinds of animals that they would have in their herds. And then the Spanish were really masterful in breeding particular types of horses like the Andalusian variety. And those are the kinds of horses that were brought back on the ships of the Spanish explorers about 500 years ago. Most people think that horses first were introduced into the United States by the Spanish 500 years ago. And that's not correct, because as you've just seen, the fossil evidence from Florida and also elsewhere in North America, for that matter, indicates that horses were native to North America from about 50 million years ago until they became extinct at the end of the last ice age about 10,000 years ago.
That was perfect, Bruce. Answered Kirsten and Sylvia's questions regarding that. So yeah, when did horses become extinct in Florida, and quite naturally about the misconception about Spanish bringing them 500 years ago. Thank you.
Yeah, but now you've seen paleontologists like to present evidence. In this 360 walkthrough, I've shown you evidence, fossil evidence, that demonstrates that horses were native to Florida and also North America, for that matter, for tens of millions of years before they became extinct on our continent.
Wow.
Okay, Alberto.
So and just a quick question before we move on. So do scientists do we know like why they might have gone extinct?
Yeah, so that's a really complex question, and it also relates to the other kinds of animals that used to live in Florida at the end of the last ice age, about 20,000 years ago. So animals like horses and mammoths and mastodons and giant sloths and some of the other animals depicted in that mural all became extinct about 10,000 years ago, and scientists have various ideas for how they might have become extinct. It wasn't a single event like an asteroid, like some people think is what happened to the dinosaurs. It probably was a combination of factors, including dramatic fluctuations in climate and for food resources, competition with other animals, and possibly also hunting by a new species which began to populate Florida between about 15,000 years ago. That is to say, our human species. So the reason that these animals became extinct in North America is likely a combination of those three factors.
Wow, very interesting. It's so amazing how we're always learning new things, which actually leads me to this next question. Are we still to this day learning things about horses and their evolution? Like, dare I say, is like the evolution of horses written in stone at this point?
Not at all. Paleontology always advances by new discoveries. And let's go to the Montbrook Fossil site as we exit the exhibit.
All right. So let's go right around here.
So our museum paleontology team has an active fossil site Well, we are collecting 5 million-year-old vertebrates. So fish, amphibians, reptiles. We just described a new species of bird from this locality, a swan, and also lots of different kind of mammals, including horses. And as you can see right in the foreground here, that's actually a type of ancient elephant-like animal called the gomphothere. So these animals are not, they're still in the process of being studied and prepared and cleaned up and glued together, etc. And this is how we do the science of paleontology once we collect fossils from the field. Again, this is from our Montbrook Fossil site located in rural Levy County, about a 40-minute drive from the University of Florida. And over the past 6 years since this fossil site has been discovered, more than 500 people have helped us as volunteers collecting fossils from this Montbrook site. And this is just an example of the photographs in the background of various people helping us to collect fossils from this particular site. This site also indicates, again, various types of herbivores, plant eaters like the horses and the elephants and some of the other animals, as well as some of the predators, like some dogs that used to live here. And we have animals that lived on land. The Montbrook locality was very close to an ancient stream, so we have animals that lived on land that you can see here. But then to the left, we also have animals that lived in the river, like ancient gators. Turtle. I can see a soft-shelled turtle over to the right. Other kinds of turtles in the back. And various other types. I actually see an otter all the way underneath the M under animals. There's that's an otter jaw. So there's lots of new things that are being found. So to answer your question, Alberto, as paleontology, the science of paleontology is always continuing to discover new things that advance our understanding of ancient life, not just in Florida, but in elsewhere.
That's amazing. That's really cool. Yeah, and I really love this exhibit right here because it not only highlights these amazing fossils and pieces, it also even highlights our volunteers and the people that put so many hours in helping us out at these sites, which is really great.
Right. Yeah. And if you're over 18, you can sign up to help us dig at the site. And I believe Stephanie put the information. If you were interested in volunteering, you can sign up given the link to the website that was included in the chat.
Yep, it's on the chat. That to me is just amazing. Being able to be a part of this and telling this amazing story. I think it's such an amazing opportunity. Well,
very good. Yeah, very good, Alberto. Thank you. So that wraps up my tour, leading you on a journey through time to understand the evolution of the fossil horse and its ancestors.
Thanks, Bruce. I'm gonna let Stephanie take over, and maybe I think we might have some questions for you, Bruce.
Sounds good.
Yeah, this is exciting. Thank you very much. I'm going to skip back to the very beginning of the tour when you shared the map of Florida. Someone was asking about the white area, that whole area of Florida, which is basically the whole southern portion of the peninsula. Was that all underwater? And can you talk about how that happened?
Yeah, so the answer is yes. There was a green place where the land was, and then there was white to the south of it in what's now the Florida Peninsula. And what happened is Florida grew.
Here it is, right here, Bruce.
Perfect. So yeah, the green part in that map is the ancient Florida Peninsula about 30 million years ago, and everything south of that was underwater. And Florida since that time has grown by coral reefs that have grown on the periphery of the existing peninsula. And they've grown southward to form the modern day Florida Peninsula.
Excellent. And this kind of relates to that. Steve was wondering, were there times in Florida's history where it was way closer to the equator than it is currently?
That's a really good question. And that relates to the concept of continental drift. And Florida has been mostly in its same latitude since it first became a peninsula about 50 million years ago. It's drifted slightly to the west, Okay, but it hasn't been much closer to the equator since it was formed.
Gotcha. So kind of shifting gears a bit, going back into the actual fossils and bones that are collected, how do scientists determine the size of an animal if they only have a few bones? For example, when you were talking about the terror bird, how do you know what that bird looks like size-wise?
Yeah, there are certain bones, like the leg bones, and the circumference of the leg bone can give you an indication of the relative size of that animal. So we would measure the leg bone of that Titanus, for example, or teeth of the rhinoceros or horses, and the molar teeth of horses are also correlated to are an indicator of the ancient size, body size of that particular species. So we can use leg bones, arm bones, and teeth. The length of the skull also helps, but in that particular case of the Titanus, that skull is really exaggerated, and that may not be a good indicator. So probably more looking at the circumference of some of the stout bones of the legs.
Thank you for that. Ms. PG's group said, thank you so much for clearing up the issue with horse size and evolution. They wanted to know, what are the benefits for size differentiation? Why do they vary in size like that?
Yeah, so during the Miocene, about 6 to 8 different species coexisted, and the reason they had different sizes is they separate out the kinds of foods that they'll eat different based on their size. And basically the evolution of different sizes of animals living together is a result of minimizing competition for similar resources. If you're the same size of an animal, of another animal, then typically you're competing for the same kind of resources. But different animals at different sizes select different kinds of plant foods.
Thank you. Kind of along those same lines, when we're looking at these different hooves in the case right here, horses were once three-toed. Naturally, now they have the single hoof. What was it for that progression to a single hoof? Your
internet broke up right in the middle of that question. Would you please ask it again?
Sure. I was asking, what was the benefit from transitioning from multiple toes in horses to a single hoof?
It has to do with the fact that when horses became very fast runners, they have immense stamina, and the central foot is basically all that was needed for them to really become fast runners.
Excellent. Tom wants to know, does the extinction at the same time support the biblical flood?
It's a really interesting question. It depends upon who you believe. Scientists typically have not connected the flood to the extinction at the end of the ice ages, but there is some evidence, some science. That's a really good question, and there have been some books written by scholars that tend to push that argument, and it's actually very intriguing. I'm not sure I believe it, but it's interesting nevertheless.
Excellent. I've got a question regarding any digging around St. Lucie. Is there anything from these particular time periods that we've addressed today where there would be fossils found in the St. Lucie area? We must have some audience members.
I don't know for sure what active digs there are in the St. Lucie area, but my prediction based on the age of the rocks is that the kinds of fossils that you would find if in the St. Lucie area, if there was a foundation being excavated, or a canal, or other sorts of excavations, those would go through sediments that are during the Ice Age, perhaps over the past 2.5 million years, and you could find potentially fossil horses related to equus and the zebras.
Excellent. We've got Joseph, who would like to know, what is the biggest fossil ever found in Florida?
The mammoth, by far. Well, yes and no. On the Florida Peninsula, it's the mammoth, but we also have evidence of giant whales, like the modern whales that we also find in some of the marine sediments fringing the current peninsula. So giant whales and the giant mammoth are the two largest animals in both the ocean, the coastal ocean areas or coastal Gulf areas, and then on land.
Fantastic. Are there any more questions out there from folks? I'm going to place in the chat box for you information for teachers on how to request a scientist, as well as educator resources that are connected to the very topic that we've been discussing with Dr. MacFadden here today. Bruce, I guess one other question I'm going to ask you, in case there's any other questions trickling in, is if one of the students on this call were interested or fascinated in paleontology after hearing and seeing what you've talked with them about today, how would they get involved in paleontology as a career?
Take classes and do well in science. When you would need to go to college and get at least a bachelor's degree. And once you go to college, take biology classes, geology classes, and if that university has a museum like ours does, you could volunteer or intern in the museum like many of the students do with us today.
Excellent. Well, I certainly want to go and do some digging around the Montbrook area. I have a question from Kirsten that I'm going to end with here. She asked, would you say that the alligator, turtle, and are the oldest animals in Florida since they still exist today? It's a great question.
So the turtles and alligators, and did you say manatee was the third one?
Yes.
Yeah, so those animals that exist today in Florida are different species that are found in the fossil record. So it's hard to, those animals first appear at different times in the past. And probably the turtles and the alligators go way back into the age of dinosaurs. The manatee less so. So it's sort of a race, a neck and neck as to whether the gator or the turtle is the oldest fossil found in Florida.
That was a great question, Kirsten.
Yeah.
We want to thank everyone for joining us today. A very special thank you to our scientist, Bruce, and our guide, Alberto. And we hope you enjoyed our time together. You can learn more about the Florida Museum of Natural History and how to volunteer at Montbrook Fossil locality with the links that we've posted in the chat box. You can also, Florida teachers, learn more about the Scientists in Every Florida School program and how to request scientists for your classroom with the link provided. A recording of today's event will be housed on our YouTube channel, along with the teacher resources that we've provided. And again, from the Florida Museum of Natural History and the Scientists in Every Florida School, we thank you very much for your time with us today. Have a and goodbye.